Okay, over to you then, Julie, who are going to set the scene in a more detailed way in relation to how this plan relates to youth work.
Thank you, Betsy, and thanks everyone for coming along today. It's nice to see everyone's smiley faces. I'll just move on to the next slide if that's okay, Kirsten. Thank you very much. So yeah, my input today is going to be looking at learning for sustainability and the links with CLD practice more kind of broadly. The definition of learning for sustainability that we're kind of talking around today is that it being an approach to life and to learning which enables learners, educators, schools and wider communities to build a socially just, sustainable and equitable society. And learning for sustainability kind of being that really broad umbrella term for sustainable development, education, outdoor learning, global citizenship and social justice. So I'm sure many of you are really, really familiar with this word cloud, and as you see, it encompasses such a huge range of themes and approaches that you might also recognise as being key elements of CLD. I think things like social justice, environmental justice, community partnerships, eradicating poverty and inequity, engaging with democracy, human rights, contact with nature. There's loads and loads in there that link into youth work and that kind of CLD broader picture of practice. So I think when we look at this word cloud, I think more about what isn't learning for sustainability than what is. Hopefully you'll see lots there jumping out that relate to your own work and your own practice and settings. So just moving on to the next slide, Kirsten, thank you. So I'm sure you'll all be really familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was adopted by all UN nations member states in 2015, which I think is crazy to think, we're now more than halfway through 2023. So when we're talking about 2030, it's not that far away. But providing that kind of shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet now and into the future. So there's the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and they were kind of designed as an urgent call for action for all countries, the developed countries and developing, in this kind of global partnership to recognise that ending poverty and other deprivations must go hand in hand with strategies to improve health and education, reduce inequalities and spur on economic growth. So lots and lots of connections to what we do in CLD and youth work. So you'll see that all the goals are kind of relevant in one way or another. However, there's particular goals around eliminating poverty, providing quality education, reducing inequalities and partnership working, which are already at the heart of what we do in youth work and CLD. So it's about making the links, trying to reference SDGs in our work and supporting staff to make these connections and embedding the Sustainable Development Goals within our work. Just moving on to highlight the CLD competence here, and when we look at the CLD standards, Council Competent Practitioner Framework, again, we see lots of connections with learning for sustainability and the Sustainable Development Goals. So when we think about CLD being that kind of field of professional practice that enables people to identify their own individual and collective goals, people being able to engage in learning and take action to bring about change for themselves and their communities, there's lots of links back to learning for sustainability and that kind of huge word cloud at the start. There's so many connections to be made. And just moving on to look at the community development approach as an approach to achieving social change. The recently refreshed National Occupational Standards defined it as an action taken through building organisation, learning and power within communities in order to promote democracy, sustainable development, equality and social justice. And kind of defining community development as being that practice that builds community capacity and influence by enabling people to develop the confidence, understanding and skills required to influence decision making and service delivery. And again, there's ties with the Youthwork National Occupational Standards as well, if you're interested in looking into those standards a wee bit more. It's just that the community development's a really recent one and it has those connections kind of embedded. So just thinking about strategy as well, and I'm really aware I'm going through this at 100 miles an hour, but I just want to get through it in the time. But just moving on to think about strategy and thinking about where we see links with learning for sustainability in terms of national policy and specifically in CLD. this is a quote from the 2022 Adult Learning Strategy, which says we want more opportunities for adult learners to develop knowledge and influence change in areas such as community-led climate change and human rights. Obviously, the caveat to that being that we're still waiting on news of the Youthwork strategy, but we would hope to see similar reflected in there when it does arrive. I wanted to take a wee minute as well to highlight the Youthwork Outcomes and Skills Framework as a kind of wee aside to this presentation. We've been using it a lot in Forth Valley and West Lothian at the moment to measure the impact of participation in achievement opportunities. And it's proven to be a really useful tool to use in terms of looking at specific aspects of work that young people are undertaking and supporting those discussions around skills and what they're achieving. And how to kind of measure that. So I wanted to just take a moment just now just to highlight that as being a really useful tool before moving on to talk a bit more about the action plan in more detail. I can see there's a couple of messages in the chat, so I'm just going to quickly pause to read them. Yeah, I'll send out the slides. Yeah, thanks so much. Okay, so just moving on to look at the plan in a wee bit more detail. I'm not sure, again, how familiar everybody is with the previous iteration of the plan. To me, this feels like it's more inclusive of CLD, youth work practitioners, and that idea learners more broadly, rather than being specific language around schools and pupils and some of the kind of things that were in the previous iteration of the plan. It seemed to me to be very, very school focused. So, yeah, for me, this feels like a bit of a positive step in that sense that it's more inclusive of our sector. The need for a renewed action plan came from the kind of rapid evolving educational landscape, but also the kind of global context that we're in. The voice of educators and children and young people who, as Betsy referenced, was part of that work in creating this refresh. The call from learners and educators is quite clear throughout the plan. More needs to be done to ensure that all learners can receive their entitlement to learning for sustainability, and children and young people are really asking for kind of bold ambition and necessary actions that need to make that change happen. The action plan contains a Target 2030 vision there that has 5 themes, and under those 5 themes there's 25 actions, and they're asking every child, young person, adult learner, educator, leader, decision maker to really be kind of active agents of change within their own communities and contexts to support and inspire others and share progress. And I think that's why it's really exciting that everyone's here today and we're starting these conversations and really looking at how we can support youth work to be heard and to really kind of capture the huge impact that youth work makes in terms of learning for sustainability. So part of the plan talks about sustainable learning settings, and it kind of tries to encompass every aspect of the learning context, and it breaks it down into what you see on this slide here as the 4 C's. So curriculum, culture, community and campus. And it's really about thinking about how young people learn, how the setting manages its physical environment and resources, how staff and learners relate to each other, how they work with their community and reach out to the wider world. And you'll see throughout the plan that the term educator is used to be more inclusive of kind of youth work and CLD and early learning centres where teacher is not the word that is used. So again, trying to kind of have as most inclusive approach as possible, which I think is a really positive step. You'll see there similarly the term setting is used throughout the document to be more inclusive of kind of youth work and community settings. The one kind of caveat to that there, you'll see that it says so every 3 to 18 place of education becomes a sustainable learning setting, and that's something that we've raised with the team at Scottish Government to kind of ask for more information on why that does say 3 to 18. So you may see another iteration at some point of the plan that doesn't say that as specifically, hopefully. So just moving on, just wanted to highlight the call to action as Betsy referenced there. This is the first action of the plan, action 1, and it starts with this call to action, which will be next Thursday, and it will be inviting all organisations to integrate these commitments into their improvement plans, strategic plans, frameworks, corporate setting plans and activities, and this may be something that you wish to consider in your own kind of youth work or CLD settings and organisations. Where is learning for sustainability in the plans? I know local authority CLD plans will be up for publication probably, this time next year. So it might be something that you want to consider if you're involved in those kind of plan writing processes. Similarly with improvement plans and such for organisations, this kind of call to action may be something that's a good place to start. You'll be pleased to know I'm not going to go through every single action in the plan. So I'll just move on to the next slide there. Thanks, Kirsten. And this is coming on to action 3, which is the creation of a Learning for Sustainability mentor network. And I've kind of just pulled out a couple of the actions in the plan that might be of particular interest to youth work and broader CLD settings, keeping in mind that it is a chunky document and you don't want me going through all 25 actions today. So it's really only a few that fit out. But action 3 centres on the creation of a new Learning for Sustainability mentor network, which will encourage practitioner to practitioner support and sharing to create a mutual support network. And I suppose when we're thinking about this, it's really important that in its creation, it is suitable for people working in community learning and development and youth work settings. And that's something we're really keen to talk about and discuss how this could potentially work. So I'll share my details at the end, but if anybody would like to share any information or thoughts on these kind of elements and how they will be created, be really keen to hear thoughts. Just moving on to the next one is action 5, which I was really interested to see this. It's an action for Scottish Government and Education Scotland to work with partners, including third sector organisations that are funded by Scottish Government, to ensure learning for sustainability is reflected within their principles, standards and corporate plans. So as part of this, there'll be a stocktake of existing organisational plans, which again, I think it'll be interesting to see how that happens. It's no easy task, I don't think, to to find everybody's organisational plans and sustainability within them. So again, another thing to keep an eye on. Moving forward, any organisation with a link into learning for sustainability will be encouraged and supported to kind of join the movement for change and help support learning for sustainability to be really visible across their plans. Just moving on to action 7 now. This action states that every setting should have a whole setting approach to learning for sustainability that is robust, evaluated, and supported by leadership at all levels. And now these actions have kind of brought it to the attention of our Scottish Government colleagues that it references other improvement plans, but it doesn't reference how good is our CLD. So you'll see there's links to how good is our school and things quite explicitly in there, and there isn't to ours, which again, it's an iterative document and highlighted this for inclusion at the next point. However, if you're really familiar with how good is our CLD, you'll be aware that there's lots of links across the framework to sustainability. And on the next slide, I've just looked a wee bit deeper into how good is our CLD and highlighted a couple of challenge questions that I've pulled out to highlight. These might be things you wish to go away and discuss in your setting with colleagues, and think about, how well do our programmes enable participants to understand and engage in local, national, international programmes, such as those relating to learning for sustainability. You'll see QI 3.1 talks about how well our operational plans align to national priorities, such as UNCRC and Learning for Sustainability. And the third one from QI 4.1 around community development talks about to what extent we are building the resilience and preparedness of our communities to engage in learning and actions relating to climate justice, the protection of biodiversity, and the transition to net zero society to realise the ambitions of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we do have those connections within our framework there, and it's always helpful to link back to that and kind of reflect on our own progress in our settings. And hopefully we'll see that feature within a refresh of the plan at some point. Just moving on to action 8. talks about the plan aiming to support policy coherence in support of Target 2030, and I think it's really important to recognise the landscape we're in. There have been so many reports and publications recently, and this includes things like the Hayward Review, the National Discussion on Education. There's so many things that have been published recently, and this action includes a commitment from Scottish Government that they will maximise opportunities for learning for sustainability to be embedded within wider reform to education, and starting that by completing a further stock take on connections between learning for sustainability and education reform that they have set themselves to be done by December 2023. So as that approaches, again, it'll be worth keeping an eye on to see how have they found these connections at the moment in terms of education reform, and where the next steps will be. Just moving on to action 20 now, so skipped quite a few there. But the creation of a Learning for Sustainability portal is something that I wanted to highlight today, again, as a key kind of action from the plan. The portal will be an online area which will be developed by Education Scotland to cover all themes and aspects of learning for sustainability. We're really keen that this new portal provides an accessible way to share an understanding of learning for sustainability, to share information, helpful resources, and really key for me is sharing practice examples of ongoing work and practice. So as the kind of development of this portal happens and begins to happen, we're really keen that Youthwork and CLD more broadly is visible and relatable. So I'd really encourage people today, if you have practice that could be shared as a case study, please get in touch. Naomi's going to share a wee link in the chat, I hope, to the Microsoft Forms. So if you've got a piece of work that you would like to support to be captured, more than happy to offer support on writing up case studies, capturing practice, videos, photos, media, whatever way you feel would be best. Because I'm really keen that if we log on to this forum or we go on this website in whatever form it will take, if we go into this portal as a CLD worker who doesn't maybe know much about learning for sustainability, how do we see it? And I think that exemplification is really important. So just rounding up now by saying hopefully you'll see there is lots of opportunities for everybody to connect with learning for sustainability and practice with the new plan, and I'm really keen to continue the conversations and highlight connections with Youthwork and CLD more broadly. And the last thing I'd like to do is just quickly highlight where we currently host a range of resources, which is our Wakelet, which again will pop the link in the chat. And the next slide, this is my last slide, shows what the Wakelet kind of looks like. It splits into categories. If you've not seen a Wakelet before, our team use them a lot in Education Scotland, and it splits into different categories, so you can click on that resources bit and you'll find lots of different links to various helpful resources. Similarly with the professional learning one, you can click on that and there's some pre-recorded webinars. We'll pop up the recording from today and things like that as well, and if we come across opportunities we share them on there as well. So again, just a way of kind of compiling things because there's so much out there, and if you have resources that aren't on the Wakelet that you'd be keen to see, please ping them across to me in an email as well and I can add them on. It's always kind of growing the Wakelets. So yeah, that's me. I'm totally happy for any thoughts, questions. Sorry, Betsy, if I've blethered on too long, but
No,
I'll
not
stop
at
now.
all.
Thank you.
I wonder if, though, perhaps we'll leave questions till after Andrea's had her input. And then in the meantime, if there are any queries, please put them in the chat, or keep your questions and we'll open the floor when Andrea's finished. Does that make sense? Thank you so much, Julie, for such a comprehensive introduction, really, to where the links are. And I know that it immediately sparks thinking, well, what does this look like in my practice? This is a big challenge of a movement for change. Every learning setting to be sustainable by a sustainable learning setting by 2030? What does that look like?